Welcome back to Gale Force Winds Season 2. Season 1 in 2021 consisted of 92 episodes, and the stories have inspired a vast cross-section of people. The feedback that Alan and Jerry receive daily was compelling and inspires us to bring so much more to you in 2022. Thank you to those that joined us in Season 1. We continue to explore the journeys of Canadians doing inspiring things.
Well, welcome to another edition of Gale Force Winds, and I'm excited to be back at it in 2022. This is season number 2 for Gale Force Winds, and we're certainly excited about it. I'm Alan Dale. With me, as always, my good buddy from the East End of St. John's, Jerry Carew. How are you, Jerry?
Alan, I'm excited, to start off 2022. We've got a couple of episodes that we recorded in 2021. Kevin is our first in 2022, and I'm really looking forward to getting to know Kevin Aylward a little bit better. I mean, there was a time when he was in the media almost every day. Now I follow him on LinkedIn. We've never met each other until we had a chat there a couple of weeks ago, and I found, Kevin's LinkedIn profile very interesting, primarily because of the industries he's in, which I know very little about. So I'm looking forward to exploring that journey.
100%, Jerry. It's always great to be in conversation with people that are doing things, that are engaged and are excited and passionate about growing Atlantic Canada and adding to the uniqueness of where we come from, especially in Newfoundland. So without further ado, Kevin, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Ellen, thank you very much. And also, Jerry, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, gentlemen. And I haven't been doing interviews in a while, but I have done them in the past. And
we guarantee you there's no curveballs going to be thrown in here today. This is all about inspiration and getting to know you. So.
Well, look, I appreciate that, and that's what I'm about. I tell you, when it comes to is inspiration, because I live by that motto pretty well every day of life. And I think when you go into try to develop your life and your career, that something has to drive you, and what that is, and that spirit that takes you where you're going to go, right? And because you're going to run into, the blockages of trying to do things, but how do you get it done? How do you get that career started? How do you get that life that you want to have, right? So, it's been quite an interesting journey for myself, and it started out in Stephenville, Newfoundland. So that's where I was born and raised. And actually, I was born and raised. I was born at Stephenville Crossing because you couldn't have. If you were a civilian, you couldn't have the baby on the base hospital. So you had to go to Stephenville Crossing to get born. Yeah. So, but born and raised in Stephenville, Newfoundland, Labrador.
My best friend, Kevin, growing up, and I never told you this, his name is Paul Joy. So you're probably familiar with the Joy family. His dad is Kevin Joy. They moved into St. John's in 1979. Paul ended up going into the RCMP, lives in Prince Albert. But him and I, best friends. I have a lot of friends from the Stephenville area. It's interesting. I'm not sucking up to you. I'm just telling you that for some reason, I have lots of friends from the Stephenville area.
Jerry, very diversified culture. Alan, it's very diversified. It is. We got a French culture, a major French culture there. We've got a Mi'kmaq culture, which my grandmother was a Mi'kmaq. I have uncles and aunts, and I have my Mi'kmaq heritage, which really only really discovering in the last say 20 years, most of us in Newfoundland, because of the way it was handled, way back, but a very diversified culture there. Plus the American base, that American base came in Stephenville, and it changed that town. It built that town, but it changed that town too, right? And it really made it more of a kind of almost a international culture, really, in one way, and the benefits and the negatives that came with all of it, but really all the benefits at the end of the day, but it was a great town to grow up in, and I went to school there, and I remember, this will date me, of course, gents, but the black and white TV and getting a color one, watching Hockey Night in Canada, and Bobby Orr. Bobby Orr. I have a Bobby Orr shrine in my condo here, right? So I have Bobby Orr, my favorite hockey player ever, and of course he's really one of the when we were young fellas, young people, sports. I was into sports heavy, got into it really early, and but Bobby Orr was one of my inspirations, actually, and he still is. To tell you the truth, he still is, and I still follow him, what he's up to, and but the character, the character of Bobby Orr, and so it started out there, and I remember trying to get my first pair of skates, and had to. Hockey equipment. We're my mother and father working on the base. But people didn't have a whole lot, as when you're growing up in those times. And I remember having to get creating my own knee pads to go on the ice to play hockey. So where you begin and then where you go from there is always interesting. And like I said, Steamboat was. I'm still involved in that town, and for all kinds of reasons. Right, it's still my hometown. I still consider really home in many ways, right? And but it was a great place to get the start in life. Yeah.
Were the Americans still there when you were there, Kevin?
Yeah, well, they didn't leave until 1966. So I was born in 1960. So as a young person, I can remember we had to check the security to go onto the base, and I remember being back of the car, mother and father, and I remember mother was working on the base and both father too, and he came from Bonavista Bay, came over. Many people came from the East Coast, right? Worked onto the base. That's where you got the first jobs, right? Came over and then of course married a lot of local people, local women, and so it that base was still there. And I remember the closure as it was 7-8 years old, and now all of a sudden your parents no jobs. It was that town. Everybody still remembers it well, and then it had to recover. Right, people had to try to find a way to get working again, and. I remember going through that, but mother and father handled it really well, and they worked at it and took on other jobs, and I remember Labrador linerboard. You might remember that linerboard mill that the government of Newfoundland put in place, Joey Smallwood of the day, and they put a new industry in trying to stimulate the place, and it didn't work out that well, but what it did do, it created when the linerboard mill didn't work, the Abitibi came in and bought that paper mill, lasted 25 years. So that investment originally led to a wonderful paper industry that created hundreds of jobs right in that area. So and it gave us all of us, the whole economy, more jobs, spin out jobs for the local economy. So I could see that as a young person really early. You could feel it too. Yeah.
What did mom and dad do on the base?
Mother was a purchasing officer, and she was also she's a purchasing officer, and my father too was in purchasing. Yeah. And he had a grade 11, and that was probably he was teaching at port, and they said, "Come on in, we want you to go to work here at the base." So, but that's how I met my mother. Came in Steamboat with the mother. Yeah.
I bet the Americans were great to work with back then, eh?
They were, of course, and they had all the entertainment coming through because the airport. So Steamboat was the largest U.S. Air Force base outside of the U.S. at the time. Okay. Very important to World War II. The stuff that went on, of course, with Argentia and Steamboat were very key to the U.S. Effort, right? And of course, we had U-boats around Newfoundland. I mean, look at the history; it's amazing, really. We were in the war. I mean, in many ways, right? Even as a colony of at the time, because we weren't part of Canada at the time when we first started. In World War II, right? And then of course. But the base itself, the Americans were, they were flying. Elvis Presley came to Steamboat. There was a whole list. Yeah, there was a whole list of top entertainers that came through until '66, right? Right up until that time, into the '50s and early '60s. The Americans really, they employed many, many people, and it was quite something else. And it's still, and right now the town celebrates the legacy every year in the summertime with, the American history and the tours, right, of the town. Yeah. So it's still very active.
Kevin, sorry, I was thinking the other day, it's too bad that we don't have, I know the Crow's Nest in St. John's has that periscope. It's too bad we don't have a U-boat. Too bad we don't have some of the infrastructure, maybe a plane. Is there a plane out there that Steamboat had? If they don't, they should get one, because I'd go look at the damn thing.
It's a good question. There is a plane, actually. When I got into politics, but I ended up in provincial politics, we ended up helping fund some costs to set up an F-102 fighter jet, which was what was stationed at Steamboat. So it's still there. So it's a monument. It's a monument, right? It's all but it's on a platform.
I remember seeing it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's there now, and Bob Byrd, local Chamber of Commerce, they did a great job and we helped facilitate that at the time, but it's still there as a legacy, and they have a museum there now, a great museum with a lot of history, just unbelievable. I recommend it. Anybody going through Stephenville, if you should go have a look, because the tremendous military history there. Yeah.
Kevin, brothers and sisters, do you have any of those?
Alan, yes, I do. Two sisters. I was the oldest in the family. Two sisters, and we're all 1, 2, 3, 4. A year apart. The two sisters. One was a pharmacist. One's still living there in Stephenville. It was my 82-year-old mother. Okay, Laura Aylward, who just got elected to municipal council for the eighth time. For the 8th time. So she owns the family record now. So we were a little bit competitive there for a few years, but I gave up. Right? I raised the white flag. She's got the record. I told her, I said, "You can have it, mother. I'm not, it's enough." Okay. All right. But my brother's in Toronto, just retired from Bell. So.
Okay. Question for you, Kevin. Would your mom be one of the most senior people in politics in Newfoundland? Maybe.
She
hold that record?
She's 28 years elected now, so she's heading towards 30. So she would be one of the longest serving, of any senior municipality in the province. She'd definitely be. Yeah,
Alan, what a great legacy, hey? Isn't that something?
Oh my God! Yeah. And how much does that speak to wanting to serve your community? Like at that age, wanting to contribute to your community. That's amazing.
Ellen, it's like, I've seen her up close, and I know a number of people in municipal politics, but municipal politics, so you're on the front line, and the amount of effort that time people give to that, right? I mean, a lot of people do it voluntarily, but municipal government's front line, right? And I've seen her, I tell you, the commitment level is unbelievable. It's just, but she loves it. She loves serving people. Like some people, it depends on what your skill sets are and what your comfort level is, but hers has been to serve people. And, so sometimes when I wonder why I don't ever wonder why I ended up in provincial politics. Okay. I never wonder anymore. So.
Right. Wow. That's an amazing story. When did you make the move out of Stephenville?
I went and did a Bachelor of Commerce. I was the first one in our family to go to university, from Stephenville to St. John's, the big city, never been to St. John's in my life until I went to university. Okay. And then did a Bachelor of Commerce, struggled to get the commerce degree, but I was able to get that degree. And
I'm in that club too.
Well, the piece of paper, okay. Marks were, they got better gradually. Okay.
Yeah.
But I really, getting that degree was going to Memorial University, which I praise. The more education that we all can get, the better, the opportunities that get created, right? And that become a Memorial has been such a benefit to me, and then that led me to, came out of that in 82, and I was going to go into some banking, and but then I got lured into, went back to Stephenville, to the hometown. Instead of staying out way in the big city, went back to the hometown and did some more courses and looked at some business teaching. That's what I was going to do. And then in 85, the election came along, provincial election. And I had been in kind of youth politics in university with the Liberal Party, the Chrétien Times and Turner Times and all that.
Right.
And I had got, was talked into getting involved there. So the local association, Liberal Association, had decided that they needed a candidate, and it wasn't very likely that that candidate was going to win because the election was coming pretty quick, right? But anyway, I had been, I was kind of home, and I was looking around thinking, gee, I think some things should be changing. And to this day, I still have a hard time trying to figure out, having the confidence level to go run at that age. It's 24 when I ran, so I was 24 years old.
Wow.
And we ended up winning. We ended up winning the seat. As opposition, we were in opposition to the Liberal Party, but I ended up winning the seat. And it was I was youngest member then for the next 30 years, ever elected, held a record for 30 years, and in the House of Assembly. But it was quite an experience, and all these people who came out and supported you, the friends of my mother and father, and everybody else who decided to support this young fella that had a Bachelor of Commerce. So I still appreciate the people who did that, but it gave me such an opportunity, to. So I ended up coming back then into St. John's, into Confederation Building, had never been in it when I got elected. So I walked in.
That must have been pretty intimidating, though. Really,
yeah,
was it?
You know, and I met Brian Tobin. Where Brian Tobin was a Western Newfoundland MP at the time, Alan, and you know, he helped me out during that campaign with his federal people, and we ended up winning. But then when you win, you got to go learn, you know, and it was quite a learning experience, as I would say. So it was.
Tell me about Kevin. That's fascinating. I mean, I want to talk about so many things along that journey. Tell me what it must have felt like at 24 years old to win that election, and what did you feel like? Do you remember the feeling in the moment?
Oh yeah. I mean, Alan, I still remember that feeling. Let me tell you, that doesn't go away. I tell you, and Jerry will know. I mean, you know, I was in a room. We were in a room, and Brian Tobin was the MP, and he brought Chrétien in for a rally for me. He was going to do a bunch of rallies, a group of rallies, right? But one of them, he got him into my riding. See, so I'm still 24, right? So Chrétien, you know, heavyweight, you know, politically, of course, and so we didn't have a podium, so they had a chair, so we all had to stand up on the chair to give our speech, right? And here was Chrétien up standing on a chair, I tell you, and he gave some speech. You know,
is that right?
And he was like, "You got to elect this young Kevin Aylward to Steamville, right?" Instead of riding, I'll never forget it. And Tobin did the same thing, did a great job. But I'll never forget when he got elected. And you know, parents were very proud. You know, they were. I think their expectation was like all of us are. You know, he's running. It's going to be an experience for him to run. You know, good stuff. But then we won. It was quite exciting. And but I had the energy level for it, and I was like. I was ready to take it on. I don't know, you know, I had a confidence factor that was hard to describe, I suppose, but a realistic one. But, you know, I think, but that commerce degree helped give that to me, I'll tell you. It did. Yeah.
Is that right? So 24 years old, you got Chrétien and Tobin, two heavy hitters up there giving a burner presentation to get you elected. That must have felt great. You get elected. What was it like walking into the Confederation Building? Like knowing that what you had ahead of you? I mean, it had to be overwhelming.
Well, it was, you know, yeah. I remember walking in and to the opposition office, right? And so I'm walking in, and of course, you know, I had just come from Memorial University, which is, it's just down the road from Confederation Building. Yeah. Only a few years before, so only 3 years before, and so I go in, and I remember Beothuk, he was a former premier, Newfoundland now, but. Who became a major mentor of mine, and he passed away there a while ago. But what a gentleman! Anyway, I walk in, and I'm 24, and I'm barely shaving, really, right? So I'm walking in, and he looks over, he says, "Who are you anyway? Who are you?" Right? I said,
"Who are you anyway?"
Right? Oh yeah, you know, Kevin,
awesome.
Kevin, you know, I'm trying to speak, right? You know, and he's like, "Who are you? Where are you from?" Right? And I tell him. Kevin Aylward. Oh, that's the guy from Steamville. Yeah. So all of a sudden, you know, it was quite a welcome. Yeah. But you know, it was, you know, learning, and it was intimidating at the same time, but also exciting at the same time. And because I always, my good mother and father raised me to be respectful of everybody and have manners, and I always today I still appreciate that, and I was just appreciate the fact I was there, and I was going to like, I'm going to be here, and I'm going to listen.
Kevin,
I'll speak when I'm spoken to, but I'm going to listen a lot.
Since we're on this topic, so walking in is one thing. What was your first memory of actually having to stand up and speak in there?
Jerry, that was nerve-wracking. I got to tell you.
I can't even imagine, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it was nerve-wracking because really, you know, I mean, the average age in the House of Assembly then was probably easily 50, you know, I mean, you know, 50 plus, right? As veteran people, you know, in their careers, right? And they're all looking over. They said, "Look, this young fella," you know. Anyway, so I'm getting up.
Who is he?
And you know, the paper. I had the paper there. And geez, I got through the speech, but you know, you learn quick. But it was quite, you know, you also watch, right? You see who's performing, and you see how they speak, and you start learning, the best way to communication skills, right? But you know what? If you don't pick them up early, if you don't adapt, that business, you don't stay around long, okay? You just don't stay around long, unfortunately, right? It's the way it is, right? You got to adapt. And even then, when you adapt, politics is a business where you could be doing a great job in your riding and you can still lose an election. So, and I started to understand that it's the kind of business you should appreciate whenever you're in it. If you ever get in it, it's when you appreciate every day, right? Because you don't know how long you're going to be there serving the people, right?
You talked about you had great mentors there. Kevin, tell us a little bit about them.
Yeah, I mean, Brian Tobin's been one of the main mentors because his father and mother were in Stephenville, and he grew up in Stephenville too, part of his life. And he helped, and his family also helped with my campaign originally, and he helped, back me to run in my first campaign. And ever since we have been, then he became Premier of Newfoundland, came back to be the leader. And then I was in the cabinet. I had made cabinet with Clyde Wells, who was also a very, an excellent premier for Newfoundland and Labrador. And I had great experience, serving with him in his caucus. But when Brian came back to be the leader, again, I have a chance to serve with a person who was a mentor, but also to be in a role of decision-making, of the highest decision-making in the province. And he's been a mentor throughout, and still is today. I'm in the business world, but we're still great friends, and the families are, and then Beothuk also. Beothuk is I always speak. He was a mentor of mine, and until he just, even up until he passed away, right? So, and these two were kind of big impact on me, and then Bill Ramsey now, who's a friend of mine. He's Jerry. That's how we got introduced there. Bill got elected around 26 years old from Port aux Basques, and Bill is he's a friend of mine for life, and we're still buddies together and still doing business together.
What's in the water in Stephenville? If I remember correctly, Clyde Wells is from Stephenville Crossing too, is he not?
Yeah, he is.
What's in the water out there?
I don't know. Maybe there was something when the Americans were there or something. I don't know. But, Clyde Wells, that was quite a learning experience, being in caucus with him and then getting into his cabinet. Again, I was the youngest probably in this cabinet. And, you really I learned a lot. And, but I also had to do my homework. You had to do your homework and perform. Yeah. And, I had the privilege of serving with a Clyde Wells leadership and a Brian Tobin, as a leader, and then Roger Grimes as a premier also, who did a great job too in his 3 years there. And but with Brian and Clyde, I'd put those two could be premier of any province of Canada, as far as I'm concerned. And they performed, and I learned a lot about leadership watching those types of leaders. Let me tell you.
Yeah, no, you had a front row seat at a very young age. Wow.
Yeah, front row. Yeah, front row. And, tough issues. And, look, politics it's a business where it's so public, right? But I mean, healthcare workers today got the toughest job in the world. Look, trying to save us, right? Trying to keep us all healthy, right? But I mean, you have to have people in politics to make decisions. And, but there's ways to do that. And there's also a way to perform it. And there's a way to carry it, right? And, I think those two, they did exemplary. They did very well, and I had a chance to learn. I benefited from that just from being around it, and I still try to use those skill sets.
Kevin, politician for that many years, it's hard work. You don't ever shut down. You're always, and it's a privilege, as of course it's a privilege to be called to that, and for people to have the trust and confidence in you to put you forward to represent them. But boy, it's hard work. You're on your game. You do not shut down ever. Yeah. That's a long journey, Kevin.
Yeah, Ellen, you understand politics, and Jerry, and we went through 5 elections, right? 5 in a row, and 20 years. I was elected 19 years, almost 20, and that's a large chunk of your whole life and your career, prime time, right? But I wouldn't take it back. It was excellent overall. I mean, all kinds of stresses, but I raised 2 wonderful kids in that with my wife, and we 2 wonderful kids who are both one's a lawyer now, and in Ottawa, and I have a daughter who's she's finishing a PhD, and so I mean. From a generation that didn't have a university degree to now, first lawyer in the family, first PhD, I mean, so where it can take you, but one thing about politics also is the balance, right? When you do get in there, when you do get there, it's keeping the balance of, I was still able to be a coach on the soccer field and still try to still do the job, still found a way to do it. Yeah, it's not always perfect, but but I loved doing it. And sports, I was, by the way, athlete of the year. Okay. Just to say, okay, in high school, I know it may not be as apparent right now, but I was in high school in Stephenville, St. Stephen's High School. Okay. Great school. And, then my two kids that I was able to, they carried on with sports, right? So, sports, so it's so good for all of us, right?
So what was your sport? Yeah.
Well, I still play tennis. I still play tennis today, but I was soccer. We went all Newfoundland with the high school. We went to the all Newfoundland championship, high school championship, 2 years in a row. I was goalie for soccer, and I played hockey and didn't do the basketball, but the hockey and soccer were the key sports, right? And then individually, tennis and squash, which I still do the tennis. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Kevin, this is going to be a tough question for you, but what was your most memorable moment while you were 2 decades in the service of your community? What was your most memorable moment?
I think when I look back at it, the thing that the final accomplishment before I left office was the most significant in the sense of accomplishing something. And it was the hospital. We had been left with the American-based hospital, Stephenville, and pretty well every other community had, health facilities were getting built, and we really needed a healthcare facility. And I had spent a lot of years and political capital, as they say, in the business of making the case for Stephenville and the area, Bay St. George and Port-au-Port. And so it really, when I look at it, there was a lot of different exciting times in there. I mean, I ended up meeting people from all over the world. I ended up traveling different parts of the world. But when I look back, the highlight of it is what you accomplish. It wasn't so much a cabinet decision, or it was back home, having a hospital that's still there today, that everybody walks into today, right? And they're still served, right? And that to me, and my mother still loves me because of that, okay? Because she's chair of the hospital foundation. But it was one of these things that when you go in there, can you have an impact? Well, that was an impact, right? Yeah. And right. But I really enjoyed too the meeting of people of all walks of life and trying to figure out, all of us, how to find our better way for us all to do better, right? So I mean, it was, I had a lot of exciting times with it. It was stressful too, yes, but like anything else.
Yeah, and a hospital, Kevin, and that's a great one to point out for sure, because a hospital is integral in our communities, isn't it? It's a place that, and if we're living through a pandemic, we know just how much we need those things in our communities. So well done to you for doing that, and fantastic. And I love your journey of, you were the first one with a degree, and now you have a lawyer and a PhD in the family, and what a wonderful trajectory for sure. So politics winds down. Where does life take you then?
Yeah, post politics, they always talk about trying to find your way, and there's books been written about the transition, right? When the other party comes into power, which was the case, Alan, and you would understand this again. It gets very cold out there. As an ex politician who's used to having a staff around you and all this. You walk into the building and people they return your phone calls all the time. So it was an adjustment period, but I mean, I knew it was going to be. I had time to prepare for it. My political career was probably, in the top 10% of length of political careers. So I had, I came out, and the transition was challenging. There was no question. But I mean, I had my health. I was okay. I'm gonna, I always looked at it as, you got to build new, use your skill sets, try to figure it out, right? So the first 3-4 years were were challenging, but really I took on some different things. I did some courses. I did, interviews and jobs and stuff. And people, when they're used to seeing you as a politician, it takes a while for them, even in the employment side, to look at you in a different way. It takes a little while, and understandably so. And I had to, deal with that psychology. But I did find out something about myself that I was used to getting things done. Whatever I did in politics, I was always used to trying to find a way to get people together and resolve matters and let's move it. And that's so after a while, I figured out that, and working with a group, I was pretty good at that. But then I went and did some management contracts. I ended up in Goose Bay, taking on the role of CEO of the Goose Bay Airport in Labrador. Got a chance to live up in the big land, which is beautiful. That Labrador is some spectacular land. Okay. I mean, if you haven't been out there, I mean, really, it's something else. And the highway now is just about finished, right, all the way. But I had a chance to go up there amongst the Inuit and the Innu, and that was quite an experience. And I helped, create the new package for the new airport terminal, which they needed also, that had been left over, and went in and did that, came back out of that, but got to know new friends, made new friends. But then after that period, I ended up going to Bay Street in Toronto to learn how to become a stockbroker. I had always wanted. I had a commerce degree, didn't know how to trade a stock, so I said, "Let's go figure it out." Yeah. So BMO Nesbitt Burns said, "Kevin, let's go to Toronto, spend a few months," and so I did get qualified to be a stockbroker, an investment advisor, which I found to be one of the best things I ever did. I didn't stay with it, but I learned so much out of it that the business I'm in today, it wouldn't have happened without going to Bay Street to learn the ropes, right? And and I thought that was beneficial. And I did find also, you've got to work on yourself as to your skill sets and figuring out what you're good at, what you do. Because if you do get turned down for this and that, you can't let it impact you. You got to keep thinking the positive side, right? And so I kept on doing that, and I was, my health was good. I had still my finances were in still half decent shape, and I was, you're still working to try to make a living, and but you also got to find a way to keep yourself motivated and something you like doing, and so I sacrificed probably taking a job here or something that might have done something to try to stay with something that I could be comfortable with.
Yeah. So, Kevin, Goose Bay to Bay Street, you can't, great little journey there. How old were the kids when all of these changes were happening?
Yeah, they were, 2003, I left politics, right? So, and then, they were probably, 12, 13, 14, and I was spending more time, yet I was also trying to find employment, and, and I had more time, and I was, doing more coaching. I remember the basketball. My son is 6'5", big, tall guy. I loved going to the basketball. I didn't play it, but boy, I started going to it. I'll tell you, and I loved it, enjoyed it, right? And I learned a lot, played with him too. But so I was doing that, and they, I got to spend more time and watching them and being around them, and which I still so good. But then at the same time, 2000 up till 2010, then they were in the high school, graduating out, in planning their education, they're doing their decision making, and then I got dragged back into politics for one more round, which is 2011. 2011 with Muskrat Falls, when the Muskrat Falls had come around, right? And the Liberal Party was looking for a leader. The leader had taken ill, had an illness, and it was in August month, and the election was October, so we had to get a new leader for the party. Wow. And I got talked into doing that. So I did take on the leadership. I took it on, and we did run for that short period of time. I did run through the election of 2011 as the Liberal Party leader in Newfoundland and Labrador, which I had been almost 10 years out of politics at that time, 9 years, and I was really starting to make my way, on the business and understand the business. But Muskrat Falls was such a challenging deal for the province. I thought then, I said, well, and the party was in big trouble. If it didn't survive, it may not have survived. So I went into it, and we did haul out the opposition status again for the party, and I didn't win my seat, but I was traveling all over the province. We only had so many days, right? So, but that was quite the experience, and we did that on the Muscat Falls thing, and then when it was over, I didn't win my seat. I handed it back to the party, and they put the next premier was in place. Then Dwight Ball, he ended up becoming a premier, right? So, but I went back to business. I said, look, okay, done that. Tried to tell the province about Muscat Falls. I did everything I could to say, got a problem here. But anyway, not say, I just had some instincts about the deal. I knew energy pretty good, and I got a chance to get around the province again, and with a bus, I had a bus, right, going around the province for 21 days. But I didn't want it to be like, well, this guy can't stay away from politics. I just came back in because the party, it needed somebody that could put together a policy platform, raise the money, get some candidates in place and do it quick, right? Yeah. And we did. And look, we almost pulled it off in the sense of my own seat, but that was fine. I was quite content to just say, look, carry on the democracy. Let's keep carrying on the democracy, and went back to the business world after that.
Kevin, I can't help but think, listening to you talk about your journey post-politics the first time and finding yourself in business, and your kids were 12 and 10 or 12, or somewhere around there. Them watching you find yourself must have inspired them as well. I mean, that's an interesting time to watch your dad try to find his place as well. So you must have inspired them to do great things during that journey.
Well, Alan, is a good question. I think it was a time where they also at that age they're watching more closely, and they're thinking about more and more about what they're going to do, right? And their mom was a French immersion teacher. They both ended up having bilingual skill sets. But I was very cognizant of, because I wasn't working, kind of full time. I'd be taking on, like say roles, and I'd be trying to, there was some I took on with no income, trying to just get in there and then create the income. And but I tried not to have them see the struggle that I was going through trying to find the right role. I tried to make it. It was always, right. But they also made sure that I wanted them to see the parent always being motivated to do, to get on, to be appreciating every day, appreciate what you have. That's what I used to preach to them all the time. And there's always something to smile about, even though we all go through what we go through. And some people go through so many more challenges than others. But, and then, we should be so much kinder and empathetic to people who, we should always be, right. But that's what I try to, put them into that kind of frame of mind. And, they turned it okay. I think maybe it was more for their mother. They turned it, but their father had something.
Being optimistic is certainly a skill set, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh, it's big. It's so big.
Sorry, Jerry, you were going to
I was just, it's interesting, the whole concept of a parent like you, myself, and Alan, you want to be the best role model for your children. And I found starting out in a career is challenging, but coming close to the end of a particular part of a career, which I have had happen to me as well, is also challenging. And it's interesting, Kevin, listening to you, try and be that role model. I'm trying to be the role model to an 18-year-old who's just starting university and has his struggles. Well, I feel somewhat like I'm 18 again, trying to navigate through a pandemic and pivots. And it's interesting. You got real good practice in pivoting when you finished politics, and you've been pivoting well since, by the sound of it.
Yeah, the mental health that goes into, so much now today, right? That I am, when I see that the emergence of that issue much more public, right, for all of us, to be able to talk about it so freely, right? That, it wasn't talked about so much those days, right? Even back to my father, people go through different issues if you lose work, and your how you feel about yourself, right? Work is so impactful on your psychology, right? I think more and more we're all trying to say and learn that it's not about what you do, it's about who you are, and the value, right? And it really is, Jerry. I think more and more I try to, even people I'm dealing with now and through this pandemic, friends of mine, right? We all got to keep watch over, and try to keep the encouragement factor, right? Because some people are in business today and some of the sector they're in, it could have had a hotel or these hotels and people working in that industry and the industries that have been hit so hard, right? I'm in business now a long time, besides government. I understand government, but I also understand the private sector about, putting your line of credit on the line for your business and writing the check to keep the employees going, right? That's, that can have a strain. And I think it's really, we all be aware of it. We need to be more aware of it. And, but I learned to pivot and sometimes you realize that, because you weren't getting the nod in the 20th interview you did, it didn't happen. Maybe it's because you really need to be doing a business on your own, something like that, right? So you learn, right? You try to figure it out.
Kevin, there was one thing there I wanted to circle back on, and that was you kind of kicked off the conversation talking about Stephenville and talked about the interesting cultural mix that existed there, and you introduced us immediately to the Indigenous connection to the area and indeed your own Indigenous heritage. And then when you talked about pivoting and making your way up to Goose Bay, one of the first things that came out of your mouth was your connection and with the Innu and the Inuit community. Tell me the importance of those relationships, not only to you, but to Newfoundland holistically.
Oh, Alan, I tell you, it, our own family heritage, if you look at the Mi'kmaq, the island of Newfoundland, right? It was kept down for right up till into the 80s, really. It was, we were growing up. I was told as a young person, don't talk about, if somebody calls you an Indian, or whatever, you just weren't asked to talk about it. You weren't, it wasn't. So when you grow, you start growing, you start evolving on it, how you think about it. The Innu and Inuit and living in Labrador and we wouldn't have, as an example, just understanding our history, right? Labrador was owned by Quebec at one point, in our history, okay? And then there was a decision by the British government, the British court made a decision, a Privy Council decision was made on who was the boundary for Labrador was made. And one of the key reasons that we in Newfoundland and Labrador have the Labrador that we have is because of the boundary lines were drawn because of trap lines of the Inuit and the Innu, and that's how they based their decision, right? So, we need to understand our history about, I'm more and more immersing myself in that, even though I do the business world I'm trying to do, but I try to help out my organization in the West Coast, and I stay close to home, and I try to promote the culture too. I'm doing more and more of that, even in business, Indigenous participation. You see more of that coming, right? And these other issues that are out there that are so serious that need to be taken into account, especially in Northern Canada. So I think it's part of your persona, and I'm glad that I have gotten more into it to understand it better, and helps you figure out your personality, and how you operate, and I think it's part of caring. It's a caring thing too. I think that part's part of that too, part of your personality. Yeah.
We have a beautiful richness to the fabric of our country as Canadians, and especially in Newfoundland. And I want to touch on another thing too, and the Indigenous, of course, communities are a huge part of that tapestry. But I want to tell you, you talked about how beautiful Labrador is, and we have a lot of guests on our podcast, and I find many of them are from Newfoundland proper, and we don't tend to bring in a lot of guests from Labrador. And I have two sisters that live in Northwest River, and I'm often being told, get more guests on from Labrador. But I visited Labrador, and there's something very special about that place, isn't there? Tell us a little bit about the impact Labrador had on you, Kevin.
Oh, geez, Alan, I tell you, when I was a young politician, I started reading up on the Churchill Falls deal that we all hear about, Jerry, about the history of that deal, the province, and I was a young Bachelor of Commerce in the cabinet, right? I think it was, and so I used to read these documents in a different way. I wanted to know why, how did we ever get into that? So as I started reading into that, and I started understanding, it's all about, and again, it all happened in Labrador, right? And so then when I was in government, I was blessed enough to be able to travel there. I worked with a gentleman, Ernie McLean, for example. Well, he's still there. He was a cabinet minister for Labrador. He's still one of my friends. And I got to know it by being there a lot and meeting the Innu and Inuit people, and also the people that were working, everybody working there that were from all over, the province, right, and elsewhere. But Labrador has a real special history. I mean, that whole Labrador was even profiled in National Geographic. It's got Smithsonian Channel, highlights, and I mean, Labrador has got so many resources, right? Yet it has also got this. They call it the big land, right? And there's something special about it. When you go there, it has an impact on you. So I encourage people just to give it a try. Right?
Well,
I mean,
Kevin, I got to tell you a quick story. I graduated from business school, was doing some videos, ended up going to Labrador, a place called Pax Harbor, Labrador. But when you talk about the big land, this is what happened. Drove to Lewisport, got on a boat. That boat got into a bit of rough weather. I can't remember how long, but 10, 15 hours, I don't know what it was, to get to Cartwright. Then I got into Cartwright, got into an open boat, and got ferried out to Pax Harbor in about like a 40-minute open boat ride. Anyway, I think it felt like 2 days traveling. Now, this is 30 years ago, but the big land is perfect name for it, and it is beautiful.
Yeah, it is. And I think, I've ended up like with the combination of, I went up, had a management contract with the Inuit, which is the Nunavut Inuit in Goose Bay, who are the Southern Inuit of Labrador. Yeah. And I went up and I was an advisor to Chris Montague, who's another one of my great friends. He's a president of the Inuit there of Nunavut. And I became an advisor besides on the Muskrat Falls project, again, dealing with that. Plus, I was an advisor I did their business development. And, but really, I got to know, again, their original history and culture. And then I ended up, with Muskrat Falls. Again, it was energy, right? So then, and then I had read about the history of Churchill Falls. And when you understand the contract history, what the impact has been in our province, and I ended up in the energy business. After all of this, I ended up, and why do I wonder why I'm in the energy business? Well, I don't wonder, right?
But Kevin, go ahead, Alan.
I said, that's an excellent conduit into what are you doing now? What's in the moment for you, Kevin?
Well, Alan, I tell you, I'm now 5-6 years ago, around 2016, I ended up, 2013, I took over a public listed company called West Energy, which had some oil leases in Western Newfoundland, which is right next to Stevemill, right off Morbrook Stevemill. So I ended up taking over this little junior company, and I wanted to get public company experience for the stock market. I wanted to understand it. So one of the group said, "Look, why don't you take that over?" And Wade Daw, who's one of the bright entrepreneurs of Atlantic Canada, okay, and so I took it over. I know
Wade, actually.
Yeah, Wade, very bright, very successful entrepreneur, one of the most successful in Newfoundland Labrador's history, Atlantic Canada for that matter. And, and he knew I wanted the experience, and I appreciate that he did that. And so we took that company, 2013. So really, 2013, then, we took it. I took that company, and then we ended up making a mining company out of that, which still operates today, called Ceylon Graphite. And that's an international graphite mining group that's trying to mine graphite for the electric car, industry these days. But I had that experience.
No, there's no future in electric cars.
so I ended up doing that. At the same time, then I got approached about offshore wind power, and a gentleman named Kirby Risser, who we became good colleagues, and let's work together. And about offshore wind and we put a team together, and we both went about it trying to attract partners in. And 2017, we ended up, going to Boston and Toronto, and we ended up negotiating with a company called Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners, and they're one of the largest offshore wind companies in the world.
I was going to say, if they believe in your wind, you're going to move, yeah.
And I had been, I knew the oil and gas business in Newfoundland. Here we are with the the developments we have with Hibernia and all that benefit, right? But I got educated on offshore wind when I went to Boston in 2016, and I was in a room of all these senators and these energy executives, and they were all planning offshore wind at 2015. And I said, this is coming. And offshore wind, onshore wind, offshore wind, Atlantic Canada, we have a great resource, have a gigantic resource, right? So ended up, we put that company together, attracted some capital. We attracted CIP CIP. They're still a partner today. And we have a new partner addition to that. But so CIP, little Beothuk Energy, Newfoundland-based company, Newfoundland Labrador, CIP. So offshore wind, we are hoping, in the next period of time that there will be an offshore wind project announced in Atlantic Canada. These are big, 8, 10 megawatt towers, Alan, now. So that industry has gone from doubling the capacity in the last 5 years, right? And here we are in Atlantic Canada, importing coal, for example, from outside of Canada, right? And we got a chance to put in a new industry here, right? So good chance. So again, all private sector attraction of capital, international capital into Atlantic Canada, Newfoundland, and we have a project in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick sites that we're hoping that will go. And what a learning experience. Had to go to Copenhagen to help negotiate this thing, into Hamburg, Germany, to go to an international wind conference. And we immersed ourselves and got to know it. But a small team pull that off. We're still hoping that as entrepreneurs that there'll be a deal sometime in the next year or so. I'd like to see it. I hope anyway. For Newfoundland, Labrador, for all Atlantic Canada, all of Atlantic Canada, thousands of jobs involved here. Thousands of jobs.
Yeah. Thousands of jobs.
Thousands. Right now, if any of your listeners, you go on the map and you punch in U.S. offshore wind, right? You're talking, it's $100 billion of capital expenditures in the next decade. So 100 billion. So we just went through, if we're building a project over Newfoundland offshore oil, it's probably 3 or 4 billion. So you're talking 100. We're talking literally 20,000 megawatts of offshore wind power is coming up the eastern seaboard. And Atlantic Canada, I'm on LinkedIn, Jerry, where you find me on LinkedIn. The reason I'm there, one of the reasons I'm doing is I'm trying to, educate all of ourselves about this industry is already here. It's already started. Let's come on, Atlantic Canada, let's go. Whether it's my company or it's some other company, let's get this industry started, okay? Because right now it's clean energy, and there is an energy transition going on, right? There is, right?
Yeah. Well, it's amazing. You look at what Elon Musk has done with Tesla, and frankly, he's talking like you're talking. He says, "Come on, just bring all the manufacturers into that industry. The more, the better." Yeah.
Yeah, and we're going to have
thousands of jobs. Thousands of
thousands.
Jobs.
We're talking each of these projects, like say example in Nova Scotia or Western Newfoundland, which is Stephenville, by the way, is the site. Now my hometown happens to be one of the best sites, okay, next to the Maritime Link, Alan, okay? Just happens to be one of the sites that they're looking at, okay? So that Stephenville is always in my life. It will always be.
Is that because of the topography and the way it blows in off the water?
It's also because the airport, it's also because of the Maritime Link, because the Maritime Link was built that they could sell the power over the line to Nova Scotia to then help displace the coal that's coming from South America. So that's how you'd sell that power, right? But it opens the door to that. That's what I'm saying. It opens the door, but it's all private capital. There is billions of private capital right now looking at Atlantic Canada, and there's companies in here like ours and some others trying to open the door to get some of this type of wind energy into the marketplace, right? And once they do, it's in rural areas, right? So places like Sydney, in Nova Scotia, up in New Brunswick and Belledune, these areas, Stephenville's, they have a real chance here, and rural jobs. These ports get supply bases out of them, really. And if you can go online and look at Massachusetts now, Massachusetts is going ahead, New York, New Jersey, right up the East Coast, right into Maine, they're doing it.
Yeah, and these are interesting jobs, right? There's interesting technology. I mean, everything. Kevin, we had a woman on our podcast here a few weeks ago talking about her consultancy is all around mitigating sound in the ocean as they put in offshore wind. So, I mean, as you look to all the jobs that are created around creating it's just a beautiful thing to see. And you're right. You're so right to point out a lot of these are in rural parts of Atlantic Canada that really need that little boost to push them forward. I think that's fascinating stuff. Kevin, you've had an incredible journey. There's no doubt about it. But what really fascinates me is, I mean, you're just so willing to learn. You're so willing to try and take the opportunity to learn a new skill, add to the breadth of your experience. It's such an openness for that. And that's why, obviously, you're so very successful. We always ask our guests, to leave the audience with a piece of advice. And a guy like you now have had this great journey, and what would that piece of advice be?
Well, I'll go back to Winston Churchill. Is one of my I well read on Winston Churchill about the pros and the cons, but in the sense of the historical nature of what he did with the World War II, and how again that really Winston Churchill ended up giving the two, Stephenville and Argentia, both of them got created because he did a deal with the Americans. Okay, so Churchill, but he gave a speech, and really the line that I always use, right, is never, never, never surrender, right, and I use that only in the sense of motivation for myself. That no matter what you're doing, at times that it may seem like you're going on a path and it's just not working out. And, Jerry used the line earlier about pivoting, right? Well, there's a fair bit of that we all have to do, right? But your own instincts, for me, the way I look at it is if you can understand your own instincts about what you want to be about, is carry on with that. And the people that want to be around you, and the companies or the professional people that want to be around you and you around them, that will find its way. But you've got to get to know that, and don't surrender. Do not surrender. Yeah. No.
Jerry, your thoughts?
Well, I just got to touch on that. It's funny because a lady said to me, I'm in business development, as you know, and I sent a note to a lady today, and she emailed me back, Jerry, we're going through hell right now. The only thing I could think of in replying was Winston Churchill quote, if you're going through hell, keep going.
That's absolutely right. Absolutely.
So, anyway, it's funny you bring up Winston Churchill, but, I've really, really enjoyed this conversation today. And, we haven't even gotten into your liquefied natural gas that you're involved in. Just touch on that before we go.
Yeah, well, as some of my colleagues are saying to me, I say, Kevin, how come it's the deal making is only whales you do instead of these are all multi-billion-dollar try deals that we're trying to deal with here. So the LNG in Newfoundland is it's got offshore gas. It's been for years talked about here, Alan, as Jerry knows. It's been here years trying to figure out how to get it to move. And there's a whole team of people that I'm working with that I'm very pleased to be a part of that overall effort. And for the first time, we've organized a group to really, and it's a second time around for some of them, but in the sense of the timing now, where this is going. So we got a group working on that. And really, again, it's part of energy transition. That we are already producing gas offshore Newfoundland, a chance to monetize it, but also then to create more value-added jobs here for us in Atlantic Canada, for Newfoundland and Labrador. And new jobs, all private capital. It's going to be all private capital coming in to look at it. And look, it's still uphill, but we are started the ball rolling, and it ended up that's marine energy, and so is offshore wind. So here I am. I got two marine energy, situations that I'm trying to do in Atlantic Canada in my home backyard, right? And that's where the skill sets have taken me, and I'm hoping that the LNG can go, Jerry and Alan, for all of us, because it'd be great. We'd export that to potentially to Europe, because right now they want to get off coal and lower the carbon footprint, right? So that's all it's about. So,
well, I appreciate, it's right. You're talking about whales. I think about bricks and mortar businesses. You build not to diminish anyone who has a bricks and mortar business like a convenience store, but holy moly, and just listening to you, and I've got interested in your LinkedIn profile when you started posting all of the wind energy things. And it's not just you trying to sell your business. I could tell you're just trying to sell the industry, and it's what you share is fascinating. So if anyone hasn't followed you on LinkedIn, I encourage them to do so, because you get to learn a little bit about an industry. Like you said, it's a new industry and it could land 1,000 jobs. The liquefied natural gas is an add-on to that God knows how many that will bring. So, Kevin, I really want to say thank you for joining us, because it's opened my eyes to the potential that we have here. And, Stephenville is near and dear to my heart. I have some really good friends. I told you, Paul Joy I grew up with, Wayne Howlett I met in university, a good friend of mine, Bruce Chislett, is from Stephenville, and they've been really good mentors and people for me. But I think just in listening to you talk, and when the United States shut down the Stephenville base in 1966, the entire community got thrown into a challenge. And I think we can learn from the people of Stephenville, as many other communities in Newfoundland. Just because we got a pandemic doesn't mean that we can't learn from what was done to pivot back then. So we've had a lot of practice, I think, in pivoting. But anyway, I just want to say thanks. It's absolutely riveting to listen to you talk. And I think Alan, have to invite Kevin back, in 6 months to a year's time, to just touch base and see where it all is going.
No problem. Alan, thank you very much, for the opportunity to be interviewed again. Okay. With you. I appreciate it. Okay. And I look forward to having a chat anytime. Jensen, keep up the good work. I'm following you. You're doing great, Jerry. I mean, this is an opportunity to get a lot of people out there just talking about, what they're doing and what they're up to. And I think it's a wonderful mechanism for it, a wonderful portal to do it in. So keep up the good effort, John.
We appreciate that. I mean, you know what, Kevin, as we've said to you, I said to you before, I think there's too many people, too many avenues for the negativity to flow. This has been a bright light in my life, in Alan's life, and look, people like yourself doing things, you deserve a pat on the back, and that's what we're all about. It's exposing some of these beautiful ideas and inspiration, and we get notes every second day about someone who's been inspired by it. And if we can't lift each other up, then we might as well not be doing anything. So anyway, Alan, what's your final words?
Well, that was another wonderful edition of Gale Force Winds, to be sure. Growing up in Stephenville Crossing, having to make your own shin pads to play hockey. Pretty impressive to go from there to having John Kretschan and Brian Tobin stand up on chairs, give a barn burner speech about why they need to elect you, and then go on to serve your very community for 20 years. Highlight of which, as you so rightly point out, positioning a hospital in that community, the focal point of the community, so needed in the moment. You were a big part of that. Leaving politics and then showing your young children how to remain optimistic and look to new challenges. And then from that, them going on to become a lawyer and one with a PhD. This is inspirational stuff. Yeah. Your mother, who at 82 is still serving her community, must be incredibly proud of you, Kevin. So we, as Gale Force Winds, always like to leave the audience with our own piece of advice. And quite frankly, the world needs more Kevin Aylward. So thanks very much, Kevin.
Alan, thank you. And I like your name, gentlemen. Gale Force Winds. Okay, wins and wins. Okay, all right. Gale Force, we like that. Okay, all right.
I bet you do. And I'm going to add something. The world needs more Laura Aylward. I think that's your mom's name. Right?
I tell you what, she's going to appreciate that one. All right. Okay.
Thank you for tuning in to Gale Force Winds. That's Gale Force Winds, WINS.com.